About 10 years ago, in the wild year of 2008, two movies came out that would become very important to the industry later on: Iron Man and The Dark Knight. Iron Man kickstarted the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and The Dark Knight created a new golden standard for every superhero movie to be compared to. Both films are met with enormous success. 8 years pass, and the next interpretation of Batman is brought onto the screen with Batman vs. Superman. This film is important because it kickstarts the DC Extended Universe, and it's also important because the DC Extended Universe killed my wife and took the kids. Now I, for one, didn't hate this film. I thought it was a neat way to make two different sides to an issue that humanity may someday have to face. Both seem valid, and it forced the audience to think, who's really the hero? Granted, I only saw this movie once, way back when, and my expectations for it were so low, because of all the reviews, that I could have been stabbed 3 times in the chest, and I'd still think, oh, that was better than I thought it would be. Fast forward to the present day. We're 6 films into the DC Extended Universe, and each one is, apparently, better than the rest. If I had to rank them, I'd say Batman vs. Superman is on top, then Wonder Woman, and I never saw Justice League or Man of Steel, so they can't go on my Watch Mojo list, but then I'd put getting kicked in the groin for an hour and a half right about here, then a little bit below that, I'd put Suicide Squad. But then, out of the blue, one film came to the surface, promising to be better than all the other fish in the sea. This film, of course, is Aquaman, which officially made over $1 billion at the box office. So I thought this film might be worth checking out. Did I like this movie?
That was the worst
Movie.
ever.
After some sort of long and unfortunate chain of events, I managed to land myself in an IMAX theater with some of my friends, some 3D glasses, a movie ticket, and $14 missing from my wallet. I was ready to have a fun time and maybe to laugh a few times, and marvel at the visual effects and... Anyways, I'll start at the beginning. The movie starts with a love story, of all things, between a common man and the Queen of Atlantis. While this premise alone sounds ridiculous, and I'm going to be saying that a lot during this review, it actually flows quite nicely and gives a nice introduction to the protagonist, albeit with some rough dialogue and a pretty awesome action scene. This scene goes on for a while, maybe 10 to 20 minutes, so it could be considered a short film on its own. Now, I think this is next. I don't really remember the movie all that much because I kind of tried to block it out of my memory. But we see a submarine getting destroyed by these dope-looking underwater stormtroopers, pretty much. And we saw Aquaman grown up for the first time. Each time he looks at the camera, a little guitar riff plays, and this happens only maybe 3 times, before we never hear the riff again, instead of establishing a musical theme for the character. So far, it doesn't really seem like I dislike this film all that much, right? Well, you'd be wrong. While we're still on a good streak here, let me list off some of the positives that I had to this movie. There's one point when an octopus, with all 8 of its tentacles, plays a drum solo. Now, DC, you could have just given me Whiplash with this octopus, and I would have paid good money to see it. Wait, actually that's a really good idea. Someone should write that down. But in all seriousness, Atlantis itself and the kingdoms were pretty cool. I thought they were going to go full-on horror for the Abyss Kingdom, which would have felt out of place yet familiar for the director James Wan, but instead they put in some of the coolest shots of any superhero movie I've seen. Oh yeah, a lot of the shots were really cool. The ocean was used well in a lot of them. There's one scene where the antagonist kills one of the Shape of Water Kingdom guys nonchalantly, and that was pretty badass, but other than that, I couldn't really think of a lot of positives. So then the negatives. Let's see, where do I start? Everything else. A lot of the dialogue physically hurt me at times. I tried to block it out of my head just as many people who experience trauma do, so I went to the greatest website on the internet, IMDb, to find some quotes to read aloud for you guys. Because I would say that you deserve to hear it, but that would be kind of harsh to you guys. Alright, so I'm just going to do this all in one take. So we're here on IMDb. Let's see. So one character jumps out of the plane into the desert, and Arthur Curry, who's Aquaman, says, "Redheads, you gotta love them." And then he jumps after her. Let's see. "My brother has come from the surface to challenge me for the throne. I call it an ass whooping." That's actually funny because this guy's all serious, and then Arthur Curry makes a joke. That's why it's funny. This one character destroys the device. Arthur Curry says, "Wait, shouldn't we have written it down?" And then she says, "I memorized it, didn't you?" Yeah." "Well, what did it say?" Something trident." And a little aside here, one guy a couple rows behind us actually laughed out loud at this joke, and that's the only time in the theater that I actually heard anyone laugh at anything in the movie. So, yeah. Aquaman smashes into an enemy submarine. Permission to come aboard. Alright, so this is my favorite line. This is after Manta's helmet explodes after he's been working on it in a lab, akin to the first Iron Man movie. He says, "I need a bigger helmet." Okay. Maybe I'm being a little bit too harsh on this movie. Okay, never mind. First, every other movie ever made. Then, The Last Jedi. Then Aquaman? This romance between the two protagonists is so blatantly unnecessary. It adds nothing to the plot, to character development, to anything. It's just lame. Like, why even put it in? Are you missing a demographic or something? If we're gonna get boring and cliche romance in superhero movies, how about we start putting senseless violence and action into rom-coms without even advertising it? Actually, that would be really dope. Never mind. Since we're on the topic of Mimo? What was her name? They say it like twice in the movie. At first, it's like, "Miss Schmeckledorf Lancelot III of Merrington," but then they're just like, "Oh yeah, just call me Mario." So the costume designers for this movie knew exactly what they were doing and gave her as little clothing as possible, to the point where it's distracting. And I gotta give props to the movie for gender equality too, because the same could be said for Aquaman. But no other characters, just them. So what other characters are there in this movie? The ocean... the Ocean Master, the antagonist of this movie, who did one badass thing as mentioned before and had a couple of cool lines, like, hang on. "A war is coming to the surface whether you like it or not, and I am bringing the wrath of the 7 seas with me. You know I can't let that happen." I don't know. Alright, never mind. I mean, he's fine. It's just his name is really dumb. His character's kinda dumb, too. Oh, wait, you thought Black Manta, a man with a slightly less dumb name, one of the 2 people of color in this film, who are also both villains, was going to be the main protagonist? Think again! He's in, and I counted, 3 scenes before being killed off. Or, as my sources suggest, an after-credit scene that I did not stay for shows that he was saved by Asian Jim Halpert. Cool. Maybe they'll use him in 4 scenes in Aquaman 2. One scene that really annoyed me was with 16-year-old Arthur and Willem Dafoe. Arthur asks about his mother, and the scene is supposed to be really dramatic and heavy, but instead it's like... just the way he talks is just like, "Whoa, dude, what's up with my mom, man? Did she not love me or something?" Like, full-on Ninja Turtle. I actually laughed out loud at the scene, but thankfully nobody could hear me since the IMAX was just so loud. This film had 2 themes that it tried to execute: anti-racism and environmental consciousness. I mean, yeah, those are both good things, but one of these ideas was beaten like a dead horse, and the other was barely touched. It's mentioned by every Atlantean that Arthur is a half-breed, and that he's dirty, he's impure, etc. And the reason for this is that humans pollute the ocean. Now, when you have a theme in the film, there should be some way to solve it, not just showing it and calling it a day. Even kids' shows grasp this concept. Even something like Oh yeah, now that our king is a half-breed, because obviously Aquaman becomes king. Who saw that coming? Maybe we could work together to clean some trash from the ocean. Okay, so there are a lot of scenes that I want to talk about in this movie, but so many of them are so similar that I figured, hey, we could just put all these cliches together and make our own Aquaman scene. This will be fun, trust me. We start with an establishing shot of the ocean. In the bottom left-hand corner, the text reads, somewhere in the blank ocean. It could be any ocean, the Arctic, the Indian, the Atlantic, the Pacific, any of them, you choose one. Then we pan down to the water with Arthur and Mario standing side by side talking about something. Look, Mario, I'm no king. I'm just a guy from the mainland who wants to drink beer and live a manly life. I don't care about the... Oh, but Arthur, you're the one true king. You gotta come down to the ocean. And then Arthur makes some remark, and then this happens actually 6 or 7 times in the movie. The building explodes, and some enemies come in, and they have like some kind of fight scene. Like the wall exploding and enemies coming in cliche happens 7 times in this movie. You can count it. Look, Aquaman, I wanted to like you. I tried shutting my brain off to enjoy the movie, but in truth, it took itself way too seriously for me to even do that. Aquaman was not the worst movie I've ever seen. It's not even the worst comic book or DC movie I've ever seen, but it's far from what it could have been. And that's even worse than a bad movie. A movie that could have been great with a little bit more effort, but instead it fell short. If I had 8 arms, I'd give this film 7 thumbs down. But then, I'd...